Hi everyone, we wanted to provide an update given the wet start to 2021-22 water year across California. This is Alex Tardy, meteorologist with National Weather Service. This is issued November 5th, 2021. On the screen here is a map of the current drought monitor. The improvement across the west from the recent rainfall has been notable in the Pacific Northwest and some improvement across Northern California. Keep in mind that with this drought, lots of consideration to the topics on the right-hand side, including precipitation, snowpack, soil moisture, overall storages, temperatures and evaporation, as well as fire weather and groundwater impacts. So drought is a complication of many factors as shown here. We have seen slight improvement in California. If we look across the west, specifically the Colorado River Basin, the reservoir supply remains very low. In fact, record low on Lake Mead. We've also seen significant drops over the past year on the Diamond Valley Reservoir in Riverside County. So major shortages in water supply over multiple years of drought in the west, affecting the Colorado River Basin. If we look at the most recent water year, South Central California was hit the hardest in 2020-21 with less than 50% of normal precipitation. Other parts of California, specifically Northern California on year 2 of severe drought, were also very short on precipitation and record levels. So the driest water years on record occurred in the darkest shaded areas shown on the left-hand side. Why so dry? We had very few storms that reached Central and Southern California. Overall, there were a similar amount of storms moving across the Pacific Northwest and into the Northern Rockies, but the storm track pushed almost all these storms to the north, except for the ones shown here, which did affect Southern California last winter. This upper level ridge of high pressure effectively controls and prevents storms from reaching us when it's in a position as shown here. And this position is abnormally far north, and that's why you see that dark shaded orange-red on there. We've seen this the past 2 years. In fact, starting in 2019 and early 2020, this overall position in the Pacific is unusually warm and unusually far north. And this prevents a lot of storms over the course of an entire winter from reaching parts of Central and Southern California. We've had a wet start to the water year, 2021-22, as mentioned. In fact, across Northern California, 3 to 4 times normal precipitation for October. Extremely rare for October to see the amount of rainfall that did occur in October, specifically one atmospheric river event. Here in Southern California, we've had 3 different events in the month of October. And here are the amounts shown on this table. San Diego's received around 1 inch of rain, and we've seen almost 2 inches of rain in some of our mountain locations. Significant wet start, even for Southern California, about 150 to 200% of average. If we look at one particular event, the atmospheric river in late October, we can see across the state of California and much of the West Coast, rainfall was very large in the coastal range and the Sierra Nevada, and rainfall tapered as you went from south to north in terms of overall totals. But still, we saw a couple inches of rain in the mountains of Southern California. If we look at the improvement in the reservoirs across California, we can see there was quite a bit of improvement, especially on Lake Oroville, which was on historical low this year. In fact, on October 25th, there were 347,000 acre-feet inflow on the Central Valley Water Project. Now, if you look at an acre foot and try to determine how much is that, it's about a football or soccer field full with 1 foot deep of water, quite a bit. So this one particular day had billions of gallons of water that flowed into the Central Valley. So very significant, but still the deficits are so large that the increases are only slight on most of the reservoirs in the state of California. Most notable, again, Lake Oroville, from historical low of 20% capacity, now up to 28% capacity. All of this from one atmospheric river. What are the conditions right now as we look at the Pacific Ocean? Well, we see two things. We see much cooler than average water temperatures along the equator, and that is the ENSO area. And when it's cooler than average, we call that La Nina. So La Nina is already observed in the ocean temperatures compared to normal temperatures in that zone. We also see much warmer than average conditions in the central northern Pacific, and that is the result of this past 2 years of storms going much further to the north. This allows for additional warming of the water, less mixing and movement of the ocean and turning over those temperatures. Now, normally when we start talking about La Nina, in California on the left-hand side, you typically see drier than average conditions in Southern California overall during the entire winter, and typically much wetter across the Pacific Northwest. Now, this hasn't always been the case. The Super El Nino of 2015-16, where ocean temperatures were unprecedentedly warm or above average along the equatorial Pacific Ocean, that actually resulted in more La Nina type precipitation distribution with much wetter than average conditions that winter in the Pacific Northwest and drier than average in Southern California. If we look at the wet start here in San Diego, does a wet start in the fall translate to a wet water year? Well, in some cases, the short answer is yes. When we look at the period September through November, we can see that some of the very extreme wet starts where we received 3 to 6 inches of rain just in the fall turned out to be very wet water years. However, contrary to that, there are years such as 1963 where precipitation started off very wet in the fall and it just didn't rain much of the rest of the winter. And you can see in 2011 and 12 that was the case there, and also back in 1946 to 47. Now, one year in particular was very wet in the fall, November, December 1984, where San Diego had almost 7 inches of rain. However, during the winter, 1985, from January on, just over 2 inches rain. So you can see we're not quite in the category of guaranteeing any type of average or even wet year just because we've received an inch of rain in San Diego. Now let's take a look at the outlook in the near term. So for the middle part of November, November 12 through 18, it's expected to be much above average temperatures, very warm across Southern California, and precipitation below average for most of California. What's the outlook for November? Well, we are expecting warm conditions to develop in mid-November, possibly last into late November. On the left-hand side is precipitation, right-hand side is temperature forecast by a large amount or collection of model data. And you can see as we go into the middle and latter part of November, unusually warm conditions expected for most of California. And overall dry conditions with potentially a threat for precipitation at the end of November. One thing to keep in mind in Southern California, when precipitation is limited in the fall or early winter, that is the time when our Santa Ana winds typically peak in strength and frequency. In fact, December and early January is the peak overall in Southern California. So that is why it's critical to have significant precipitation in the fall across Southern California. Otherwise, the fire weather season and critically dry fuels can continue into the early part of the winter. The official forecast calls for average precipitation, so that is beneficial to parts of central Northern California that typically do receive rain in November, and a little bit of rain in Southern California. But we also see warmer than average conditions for that same period across Southern California. Now, if we look at the month of November, with La Nina in place, the forecast is calling for above average temperatures, and that's what is predicted by latest computer model ensembles. And when we look at precipitation, it's forecast to be below average for the month of November in Southern California. And normally in November, we typically see about an inch of rain in San Diego. When we look to the heart of the winter, when we start talking about an average of 2 inches of rain per month, December through February, we can see that the temperature forecast on the left-hand side is for above average temperatures in Southern California, and also drier than average conditions during the heart of our winter, December through February. Now, this can do two things. These long dry periods and then the below average precipitation can lead to significant warm spells during the heart of our winter, and also can prolong the fire season as we go from November into December. So it's really important in November, December to have significant precipitation here in Southern California. And with the outlook calling for warm, above average temperatures and dry conditions in November, that can lead to extended or additional problems with fire weather conditions in Southern California, especially since Santa Ana winds typically peak out in December and January. Here's a look at the summary. I'll let you read through the slides. It was very dry 2020-21, the first year of drought for Southern California. We saw record warm temperatures not only last year, but this summer in our mountains and deserts. So far, we've had 4 Santa Ana wind events, and we're just now entering into the peak Santa Ana season. We do expect conditions to be warmer than average in the fall, and that will further keep our fuel moistures at a critical dry level as we go into the fall. Now, with La Nina expected and already developed, the cooler conditions in the Equatorial Pacific Ocean, the winter is expected to be drier than average and milder than average. However, with that said, as we saw in late October, you can still get powerful, strong individual storms and even atmospheric rivers in La Nina or in dry winters. You can also typically get, in these type of winters, 1 or 2 very cold storms in between the storm cycle, which tends to bring infrequent storms generally to Southern California. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and following this update.